Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the GTM Playroom. Today I'm with Mark Colgan. Welcome, Mark.
Cheers, good to be here.
Great to have you. Mark's been in B2B sales for about 15 years now. He ran a 100-person lead research team at TaskDrive, co-founded and exited SpeakOn Podcast, which was booking over 2,000 interviews for brands like Gong and Paddle. And now he advises agencies and predominantly SaaS companies on their outbound through YellowO, while running Clay workshops for communities like Clay Bootcamp and GYDA. He's also based here on the outskirts of Lisbon. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, great to be here. Nice to be in an office interviewing somebody in person as well. That's different. It's been Zoom for so long. So
Zoom for too long. It's good to bring a bit of the human back into
absolutely
into the world. Mark, so as I said in the intro, you've been doing this for about 15 years now. You started in a recruitment boiler room, smashing the phones. Around 100 lead researchers at TaskDrive, built and sold a services agency. I'd love to know, on a day-to-day, actually, how did the seller's journey evolve over that 15-year period? And how much of it was selling versus operational grind? And how much of that has kind of changed over the last 15 years?
It's changed a lot. And I think the technology has enabled many things in organizations from a seller's point of view. And I'll go through kind of how they've changed across my path in sales. When I first started out in recruitment, it was very much the boiler room, smile and dial. I think I was making 200, 300 calls a day, trying to get through to decision makers who potentially would be hiring for the candidates I was trying to represent and sell into. It was pretty much like the Yellow Pages. It was what we were going through. The Yellow Pages in the UK is the big magazine with everybody's phone numbers and the company phone numbers. So calling through to the switchboard, trying to get through to the decision maker, past all the gatekeepers. At the time, looking back, having seen lots of CRMs, they had a custom-built CRM, which was very, very good. I've seen a lot of instances of Salesforce and HubSpot, but in this particular recruitment agency, it was a really decent CRM. It didn't require too much clicking around. You could just dial. You would record the dial in the sense that I made the call and then move on to the next one. So they did a good job there. But even back then, I was actually driving around to business parks in the UK, going into an office which had multiple companies in, going up to the reception on each floor or each part of the office, and then trying to get past the gatekeeper to get to the decision maker. We don't really have to do that anymore in sales, but it definitely helped me cut my teeth in selling, rapport building, also just being able to navigate those conversations then helped when it came to the cold calls in the future as well. So a lot of the time was actually dialing, but back then it's because the company had invested in their own technology and we had numbers to call through and there was a lot of high volume. Then I did a stint in marketing where I was always supporting the sales team, but most of my role was marketing focused, building marketing automations, working with HubSpot, etc. And then moving into TaskDrive. So TaskDrive was about 6 or 7 years ago. We had around 100 people in total. Around 80 of those were lead researchers, and we had a dedicated model. So if a company came to us, which was one of our clients, and they had a sales team, they might have 3 or 4 sales reps. We would be doing all of the manual research for them. The standard research would be look up the contacts in these companies and get their email address and get their phone numbers. But there was some real unique research that we had to do. We worked for a solar roofing company. We had to go on Google Maps in a particular, let's just say somewhere in Arizona. And then we had to look on Google Maps to see when the Google map was last updated and then count how many buildings didn't have solar panels on it.
Wow.
Now, I think you could probably do that with AI now, but that's kind of pushing it to the edge of what kind of image recognition can do. But the reason we existed was because some companies realized that research wasn't the best use of their sales reps' time. So we were actually doing all of the manual work. And then SpeakOn Podcast was more of that predictable revenue outbound motion. We were pitching guests on podcasts, so it was a lot easier to send the message and pitch a potential guest speaker. But we were still building the list, writing the email, sending the email, tracking the email. So it was all very, very manual. A lot of this work that we were doing is still manual. And then today, as a consultant, I see that across all of the organizations I work from anyone from seed to Series D, but most of my clients are seed, Series A. And still 60 to 70% of their sellers' time is spent on manual stuff, which could be automated or augmented with AI, which is just a waste, really. And so I think we're going to dive into that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, no, really interesting kind of journey. And I think when you're kind of in the GTM and AI space, such as we, it one might think everyone else has got kind of these AI workflows and has kind of automated a lot of that very, very admin-based stuff. I've mentioned before on this podcast the idea of kind of intelligence versus judgment work, with intelligence being kind of the boring operational stuff and the judgment being the kind of strategic things where you need experience and nuance. And you actually talk about this a lot on the Effective Seller Manifesto that you've written. Do you mind going a bit more into that and what kind of an SDR day's journey might look like, and how an effective seller might actually behave?
Yeah, I think I should caveat with this. This is what it should look like. I think, again, seeing across multiple companies in lots of different industries, still a lot of sellers are wasting time on that intelligence stuff, which could be automated. So Salesforce came out with a new report called the State of Sales in 2026, and that even said 60% of the 4,500 respondents, 60% of the sellers' time is spending on non-selling activity. So there's still a huge opportunity to improve. And as you said, you and I are involved in the GTM, the AI space. So we just assume that everybody has this sorted, but the majority of companies don't have it sorted just yet. So building lists, finding contact data, researching companies, doing stakeholder mapping is still happening in a very manual basis. One of my clients at the moment I'm working with, they have a 10-step process to get a new number into their cold calling software. It shouldn't be 10 steps. It should be one button that you press, because AI and the tools that you can build can enable that now. But the actual judgment work, deciding on who's worth pursuing, what angles to take, how to start the conversation. If somebody has not replied on email for 5 emails that you've sent, don't send a 6th email. But when you use kind of AI and automation, it just kind of automates what's kind of not working. So I think that's an important distinction as well. The judgment work is where SDRs really develop into great sellers. And if we look at the SDR role as like the breeding ground for future sellers like AEs or full cycle reps, we really need to make sure that we're optimizing their time to make sure that they have more client or prospect facing time and conversations. So I think the whole thesis of the effective seller is like automate the process and master the conversation. And I'm seeing more companies start to think that way, but people are still distracted by shiny tools and fancy AI.
Interesting. It's fascinating because I was an SDR at Gartner when I started on my career, which, $5 billion company, had double-digit growth for about 20 years. And the tech was so backwards. I mean, there was so much manual parts of my workflow, but on a sales process perspective, in terms of what the AEs and account managers were doing, was incredibly dialed in. The understanding of discovery, proposal shaping, and all of that worked really, really well. So I'd love to understand, why do you think companies are still kind of, bit backwards with that mindset, and why haven't they really adopted to kind of the effective seller piece?
Yeah, I think what they're not doing is they're not actually sitting down with the BDRs and the SDRs and looking at what their workflow is. I think what you see typically is RevOps will say, well, we need to give our reps new account lists every quarter. So here's a list of accounts. But they're not thinking, what do the sales reps actually have to do when they get these accounts? Again, from a sales enablement point of view, I see that there's a lot of focus on sales reps during the onboarding process and maybe 90 days after they start. Oftentimes they get nothing after then as well. And when you have large organizations with multiple teams in multiple geographies, what it really comes down to is the manager's ability to coach and train and develop their team members, and every individual is different. So without having that kind of structure to the process and having full enablement and sitting down to understand what the workflows are, like what the reps are actually doing on an hour by or minute by minute basis, hour by hour, that's where it's being missed. And the tools, AI, sales tech, GTM tech, great value proposition, great messaging. They spent thousands, hundreds of thousands to get it on their page and to make it sound like it solves a problem. But one of the things I talk about in the effective seller is this idea of premature automation. If you are running a process that yields 0% reply rates, but you think an AI tool is going to help you get more, but you're just getting the AI tool to automate that same process, you're not going to get any different results. So yeah, fundamentally understanding what is that day-to-day workflow of a BDR, SDR, what are they spending so much time on? What are they doing when they look at an account? When they look at a contact, what information are they looking for? Like, you want to find out, for a rep, what makes a rep say, hell yeah, I need to contact this person, or this looks like a great account because these things have happened. And those are the things that you need to potentially automate or use AI to help speed up that process.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. If you automate kind of junk, you automate a process that doesn't work, you're effectively automating nothing.
Exactly.
And I'd love to kind of dive into that, the signal-based piece that you talk a lot about in an effective seller. And I think you gave the example of, I can't remember her name now, was it Alice or something like that, where she's a seller who receives, a few examples of signals with prospects, and she actually knows and actually understands what to say to them when she calls them up.
Yeah.
Because we talk a lot about, signal-based outreach, but if you give a seller, hey, these leads have shown these signals, most sellers don't even know what to say when they call them.
Yeah.
So, how do you actually train sellers to act on signals in an intelligent way when they're reaching out to prospects?
Yeah. Like, there's one thing, you can now really easily build a workflow which surfaces signals and alerts a rep. Like, that's very easy to do now.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years ago, that wasn't easy to do. You mentioned before that I've been talking about signals for some time. I think there's a video from 7.5 years ago where I talk about lead sourcing playbooks, but they're essentially signals. All of this was just being done manually by my team at TaskDrive. It wasn't tech-enabled at all. Very easy to build the workflow, very easy to send a message to a rep to say, this account is showing this particular event, or there's this data, but what do the reps actually have to do? And oftentimes the reps are busy with so many other things. They've got their manager breathing down their neck. They've got their quota that they're trying to hit. It's coming to the end of the quarter. They're getting stressed about that. And then they've got 20 notifications in Slack to say this account has done this or this contact has done that. But they're not enabled with knowing what to do with that information. So what I typically recommend with companies is that for every signal that you have, you need to build almost like a mini play, which is when this happens, do this. So for example, if somebody, there's lots of classic signals, which is new hire, funding, open job roles, maybe company won a bid or a tender. It's like, okay, well, that's good to know, but what do we actually need to say? How does our value proposition of our company or product or service, how does it help them in this situation right now? And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they get the signal and then they just enroll the prospect into a normal sequence, and then it kind of loses the whole momentum. I think another problem is that I don't want to say reps are lazy, but I think humans are quite lazy. We look for the least path of resistance. So they'll see a signal which is they just raised a round of funding, and they'll say congrats on your funding, and they think that's how they're answering or using the signal, but they just go straight into their kind of like high level value proposition in their email or on their cold call, when really they should be thinking like, well, if this company's raised a round of funding and our product and service does X or Y, what problems is this company likely going to face because they've raised a round of funding, or where are they going to be deploying that capital? Oftentimes in fundraising news, you'll see that they are going to try to expand into America, or they're going to do this with the money. So using that context to start the conversation is what it's all about. And then the last thing I think we all need to agree is that a signal doesn't equal intent to buy right now. The only real intent to buy is demo request or pricing request. Everything else is your best guess that this might be the right time to start a conversation.
No, that's really, really interesting. And I would love to kind of get into the nitty gritty of how that would actually work. Can you give me like a specific example of, a signal? I think you talk about a few in Effective Seller, a signal that's passed, and how do you actually take that and initiate a really context-rich, value-driven conversation with a prospect? Yeah,
I'll try and give a few from my live clients without giving away who the client is. So one company is a hosting company, so they do website hosting. So they are tracking when a competitor of theirs has a outage of their website or of their hosting. So they know that the people who are hosting their websites on the competitors' hosting packages are experiencing downtime. So then their message is, we noticed that your website went down, and actually this hosting provider has gone down X amount of times in the last month. And that's like a static piece of information or updated on a monthly basis. If you're looking for more reliable website hosting with more uptime, then you might want to consider us. Is it worth us having a call? So that's a really good example of like that can be applied to kind of many companies, all companies who are on this competitor's hosting, and then when the hosting goes down or there's problems with the website hosting, they can use it. So that's kind of like that's more of a one to many. Other examples of signals are I really like the new senior leader in a company. Oftentimes when somebody goes into a new role, they are in a position to make changes. They also go in and they want to do a great job. They want to have a great first impression. So they'll typically be looking for low-hanging fruit opportunities where they can go and improve things. I worked with a company, it was actually a friend's company, so it wasn't like a paid engagement, but I was helping him out. He has a paid advertising analytics software. So essentially it tells you how well optimized your budgets have been, what your ROAS has been for your paid ads, and where you've wasted spend, where you've potentially been advertising to the wrong people or other ways. He was reaching out to people who were in the role of head of paid or head of marketing, saying, I can tell you where you've wasted your budget. And he wasn't getting any replies whatsoever, because no one wants to admit they've done a bad job. Everybody is trying to protect their job, and they're always trying to defend and justify why they should still keep the role. Even if they're in a relatively secure position, they don't want to fuck up too much. So what we changed for him was, when there was a new head of marketing, CMO, head of paid, we would then reach out to say, there's likely been wasted budget that you've inherited. Would it be worth plugging in our tool, which could tell you X, Y, and Z? And that got many more replies than the previous one, because we were thinking about the psychology of the individual as well. So I think what's key in both of those is thinking about what, in those examples, like what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and how do we highlight that in the context of the message that we're sending. And when I say message, I'm also talking, that could be an email, could be a LinkedIn message, could be your talk track in your cold call as well.
That's an extremely intelligent workflow, which, surfacing that signal and then actually delivering that play where you kind of plug in and identify the spend for a new leader is almost something that there's no way an SDR can come up with that on their own. It's extremely difficult to. So would you say that perhaps the role of, the head of a sales development function, the VP of sales, CRO, is to establish these like core signal plays and then basically have the SDRs execute on them? Or do you think it's equipping the SDRs with the ability to understand how to act on the information and then giving them the freedom to go out and do it?
It's both. You need to sit down and think about what those core signal moments are. And also, I think a mistake a lot of organizations say is that, okay, in 2026, we're doubling down on signal-based prospecting and we're going all in. When you look at 1,000 accounts and you're tracking multiple signals, you're only really going to see 5 or 10% of activity across those accounts on a monthly basis. That's like a anecdotal.
What do you mean by 5 to 10%? As in like signals surfacing across those accounts?
Yeah,
right?
So like if you're looking for funding, new hiring job roles, maybe there's something specific about the technology that they're using. So let's say you've got 1,000 accounts that fit your ICP criteria, but you only work with companies who are using Salesforce CPQ or like a part of Salesforce. If you're tracking companies who are just starting using that part of Salesforce or Service Cloud, whatever it may be, out of those 1,000, not all of those are going to do that in 1 month. At the same time, when you're looking at hiring across 1,000 organizations, yes, there'll be open roles, but are they open roles in the departments that you kind of influence and sell to? So that's why if you double down and go all in on signal-based prospecting, you're not going to hit your numbers because there's just simply not enough.
There's not enough.
There's not enough.
Yeah.
I think signals should be seen as a prioritization play more than anything. So of my 1,000 accounts, or let's be more realistic, I'm a BDR, I've got 400 accounts that I'm managing. Every week, I really want to wake up every morning and see which accounts have some sort of information or signal that would be a good time for me to reach out. And I want there to be first-party data. So what website activity, what marketing campaigns have influenced them? Have they requested the demo in the past? Have we had an open deal with them in the past? And then what kind of third-party signals is there? Are they hiring? Have they raised a round of funding? Again, these are very basic signals. Then I want to prioritize my day on those people, first of all. And I'm going to get through 10 accounts maybe in that week. And then I'm going to move on to the rest of my accounts that have been put in my named accounts. To think about, so the head of sales development, VP of sales, whoever it may be, need to think about what's happening in these accounts before they need our product or service. What do we see in the majority of our closed won business that happened in those organizations? And then how can we track that? And again, like if you ask me that question of how do we track these signals, 6 months ago, I would have said you could use Clay, you could use Ample Market, you could use some of the point solutions out there. Now you can build some of this stuff in Claude Code in afternoons, which is just insane, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But then you need to enable the sales rep. So, okay, we've got that signal. We're tracking this data. It's coming in this way. So it might be a Slack message. It might be that the prospect gets added as a task in Outreach or SalesLoft, whatever sales engagement tool they're using. But you want to give them the context in that window. What I see a lot of organizations do is that they go, oh, well, no, we've built a custom GPT where they can put in the information in GPT. So when they're looking at the account, they go to ChatGPT and then they get the answer, then they go to Outreach, then they write the message. That's 4 steps that again, we're not lazy. We're just looking for the least path of resistance. What you really want to do is make sure that context, the context being what angle, what should I say, how should I start this conversation, should be sitting in the panel in Outreach, if they're using Outreach for their sales engagement tool, to give the reps the insights when they need it of what to say.
Interesting. I'm going to play devil's advocate here and potentially argue that, I don't know if you've seen, Alex Hormozi talks a lot about the idea of like having a really good offer trumps all. And do you think that, signal stacking or talking about signals is perhaps, it's kind of, painting the leaves of a dying tree kind of green, and it doesn't actually address the underlying problem of the offer and the product that's actually been put in play? Is a solution not to kind of stop thinking about these signals and actually focusing on the product and having an amazing offer, which kind of trumps all?
Yeah, so two ways to answer that question. The first thing I forgot to mention, you have signal-based prospecting. Then you have what I call volume-based prospecting, which is more persona-based. So if we're only able to reach 5 or 10% of our target market with signals, then we need volume-based plays alongside the signals.
Of course, yeah.
So that's the persona messaging, which does rely on the offer and does rely on the problems that you solve for people. And then the other category I talk about is marketing-led or marketing initiatives. So are you running events, in-person events? Are you attending a conference? These are just excuses to start conversations with people. And it's a combination of all three of these types of plays, which a high-performing sales development function needs to have. So that's that. On the offer, I 100% agree with you. But at the same time, you can't sell car insurance to somebody who doesn't own a car. So you could have the best offer in the world, but if your targeting is incorrect and you're not reaching out at the right time, which is what the signals help with, then even with a strong offer, you're not going to see the results. I get lots of emails so my company is registered in the UK, and I've got a registered office address, which I think my accountant manages. I get emails all the time about health and safety training, fire alarms, like all this stuff to do with the office, which I've never even seen. I've just written it so many times because I have to paste it on my invoices. So I think like they could have a very good offer. They could have the best health and safety training in the world. But if they're not reaching out to the right person with the right message, ideally at the right time, then a great offer doesn't necessarily mean success. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think Eric Nowoslavsky of Growth Engine X talks about three things, right? The lead list, that's the most important thing. Deliverability, are you actually getting their inbox? And then finally the offer, right? Yeah. So obviously 1 and 2 are more important than 3. Yeah, it's really interesting, this idea of kind of go-to-market AI and automation. And everyone has said, oh yeah, this idea of like AI SDR is going to replace everything. And the actual frontier labs who are developing the technology that people say is going to replace SDRs are actually releasing SDR roles themselves. Like Anthropic's got SDR roles, Clay's got the kind of Clay DR. Obviously, they're not a frontier lab, but they're different. Can you explain how what kind of paradox that highlights, and how the fact that Anthropic's got SDR roles in play highlights about what is missing in the world of go-to-market today? Yeah, I think I've been thinking about this a lot, and there's, again, 2 ways to answer this question. I think that there is a very good use case for AI SDRs on an inbound point of view. And I give the example of, there's a company, I looked at their fundraising deck as they were trying to raise funding, gave them some feedback. They're basically targeting the tradies in Australia. You lived in Australia for a bit. Tradies is what they call them, in a very endearing way, not in a negative way. Essentially, if you're a roofer or you're a plumber, electrician, you are on the job most of the time. You are not able to answer your phone, or even the phone might be in your pocket, but your hands are literally full with the work that you're doing. So they're building an AI receptionist for the tradies, and Australia is their first market they're going after. 100% that will work, because when I'm calling an electrician, or let's say a plumber, my shower leaked the other week, so it's very timely. When I'm calling a plumber, I just want them to come as soon as possible, or I want to get an answer that they can come as soon as possible. So the AI inbound BDR, SDR for tradies is, it takes my call, it says that this isn't a person, this is just his AI receptionist. He's available and can come at, what's your address? Okay, this is your address. This is where he or she is right now. They can be there at 5 p.m. Will that work for you? Yes or no? Yes, great. Sends the calendar appointment to the appointment to the tradie, and then the person gets a notification to say the tradie's on his way. Hands down, that'll work, because it's solving a problem that's a hair on fire moment right now, and I don't care if I'm talking to AI. However, if I'm buying an ERP system or a procurement software or a new CRM for my 100-person sales team, I don't want to speak to an AI. I want to speak to an individual, because there's nuance. There's change management that I need to think about. There are other buyers in my buying committee that I need to consider here. So I think what it shows for the likes of Clay and Anthropic and some of the other companies, their BDRs and SDRs that they're hiring, it's because there's a nuanced situation. Those SDRs aren't selling the $20 a month Claude plan. It's the enterprise plans. And the enterprise questions are, how secure is our data? How do I control what our people do and can't do? And yeah, you can put blog posts, you can put help documents as well. But the CISO of a large organization wants to speak to a human to get an answer. And they want to hold that person accountable when they give that answer as well. That's why they'll ask for the information in email and everything to be backed up. So I think really that's why you'll see that these leading AI companies are still hiring humans.
And so previously when I was starting out my career as an SDR, there were mid-market SDRs, then mid-market AEs. And I've had this thesis I've mentioned this on the podcast before that I guess the enterprise AE role is the last thing to get automated by AI. So do you think that SDRs for mid-market or like really small deals are just going to get that role is no longer relevant or useful?
It's still relevant, but I think it is at risk of being replaced, or at least those reps moving into a different role. In the Effective Seller Manifesto, I propose that there's going to be that the future sales teams are going to be a mixture of GTM engineers, or a different title for that could be RevOps. I'm not precious on the title, and full cycle. I think you'll see for any deal which is less than $1,000 a month, where there's a lot of information and perhaps you're in a more mature market, that can be completely self-serve. Or maybe it will need a quick call with somebody who knows enough about the product, but that's not usually the SDR. It's not usually the BDR. I agree, the enterprise will be the last ones to go. The mid-market, I see that the capable SDRs who have had the reps of having conversations, they've been able to answer questions and take people through a discovery process. They will they should be promoted to that more full cycle sales rep. And then you have the GTM engineer, the RevOps person who is just piping through all of the meetings, all of the booked calls to these people to take.
Interesting. And I mean, you primarily work with SDRs, and that's what you work with. I was an SDR myself, and when I actually joined as an SDR, they were trying to reduce the amount of time an individual had to spend as an SDR so they could promote them into these AE roles more quickly. But my AE, who I was working with under the time, had spent 2 years as an SDR. And when I was promoted into this enterprise account manager position, I actually thought I was perhaps missing a bit of development, which I would have had in the extra time. So perhaps this kind of shift towards moving towards like longer term sales cycle roles means that SDRs are going to have to spend more time in role, more time learning, which potentially could be a good thing for the sales profession. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when I go back to my boiler room experience of cold calling 200-300 dials a day, we spent the first month calling the C tier, like the companies who would swear at you and they'll say, "I told you not to call us. You've called me. You call me all the time. Take me off your list." We got our reps. We got punched in the face so many times with like not great leads, so that we could develop the tenacity, the tough skin to make the calls for the B and the A's. I genuinely believe that if a good SDR who has good emotional intelligence and can navigate sometimes complex conversations, those will be the ones that succeed as an AE. Just because somebody hit quota for 6 months in a row or 9 months in a row doesn't automatically mean they'll make a great AE. It's a whole different skill set that somebody has to tap into. And if they're not enabled by the organization or they haven't got the experience prior, then they're just not going to make it as AEs. And I think there's something that as an individual they need to do. And then there's also the organization that needs to enable them. But I think the longer that you're in a SDR role or type of role, the more reps you get, the more practice you have, the more likely you are to succeed, but not everybody will.
So what can an organization do to facilitate and speed that kind of time to development for an SDR and ensure that they're ready when they enter that full cycle role?
Yeah, the best, so I'm working with a large organization at the moment. They have multiple BDR teams across different geographies. The ones that are doing the best are where they have a great relationship with their AEs. And there's often a 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 ratio, especially on the enterprise side of things as well. The learning they get from the AEs, how much the AE involves them in the conversations, the conversations and the planning of that account really helps that SDR be more successful as they move forward. So I think from an organizational level, making sure there is that tight alignment between the SDR and AE, it's not going to be possible to do one-on-one, and I'm not suggesting that they do. but they need to have time with those AEs to see how those conversations are, to see how the AE navigates those conversations. When they get that difficult question about the integration, how do they handle it? Because you can read the product information, you can read your battle cards, but until you're in that conversation with a prospect, that's where you learn. So that would be one way. And then I think maybe giving SDRs small deals to manage from end to end would be a good idea as well. But again, it's not feasible in every organization.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems so obvious when you talk about it now. Focusing on actual sales skills, humanness, emotional intelligence, and things like that. But we almost get distracted by all this signal stuff and this tech stack stuff. And I have a good friend of mine who used to work at Richardson Sales Performance, sales development organization, where they advise organizations on how to improve their sales development capabilities. And so many of his clients were asking him, "Oh, what tech stack should I get? What kind of demand generation tool should I use?" And he's like, "Guys, forget about the tech stack. Focus on what your sellers are doing, how they're actually articulating, and how they're actually communicating with their prospects. So how do you actually convince leaders to focus on the human side in a world where there's a new tool every single day?"
I'll be honest, I dangle the carrot of the tech and the AI, and then when I get in there, I show them that that's not going to solve the problem. It can solve the problem in the future, but that isn't the problem that needs to be solved right now. Unfortunately, I feel like I could probably make a lot more money as a consultant if I just went along with I'll help you implement this AI and that tech stack. But I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I did that and I didn't fix the actual problem. Oftentimes, when you're brought in as an agency or as a consultant, you're there to solve a problem, but you don't necessarily know what the solution is until you get in there. I think it's a bit like a mechanic. Like you go to a garage with your car and you say it's broken. The mechanic's going to have to look under the hood. It's going to have to run the diagnostics through the computer. It's going to have to work out, I'm not a mechanic, but is it the clutch? Is it the fuel? Is it the tires? Where is the problem? And that's what you have to do as any agency, any consultant, any sales leader needs to go in and think, okay, there's a problem here. What could the possible solutions be? And I need to have conversations with people. I need to have a look to see where those problems are. And then what I want to focus on is where's the low-hanging fruit? Where's the simplest solutions that we can implement right now that will have an incremental improvement on the way things are done? And then we look at the bigger piece. And the bigger piece is usually the tech or the AI. For example, one client of mine saying, we're using ChatGPT for account research and personalization for the prospects. We don't need any more help with AI. And I was like, okay, cool. Let me go and have a look at your ChatGPT. I look at it. The account research gives, if you copied and pasted it into a Google Doc, probably 8 or 9 pages of Google Doc on the account research. And I'm looking at that going, all right, I'm a rep. What would I do with this information? How do I actually use it? What are my next steps from here? So although the client said that isn't a problem, when I looked at it, and then when I spoke to the BDRs and I say, how are you using your ChatGPTs, the custom GPTs, they're like, oh no, we're not using them.
Okay.
I've got my own one. Or I use this tool, or I just eyeball their LinkedIn profile and take it from there. So there's always a disconnect between what sales leadership say and what the BDRs, and that goes back to my point before, if you're in business development, sit down with your reps and go through it. It's almost like mystery shopping, and you go into a store and you kind of see what it's like as a customer, see what it's like as a BDR, and live in their shoes for a day. And I don't think enough leadership does that.
Yeah. Why not? Is that due to a lack of change management, or just what's causing that?
Usually time and capacity. To think about shadowing a BDR, that's going to take a lot of time. Probably a bit of ego in it. I'm beyond this now. I've been promoted. That's not everybody, but there could be some ego. And also, they're answering questions coming from the CEO or from the board about numbers, this, that. So they're running. They are in some cases running scared that they're not hitting quota, and they've got to improve the numbers. And the traditional answer to improving the numbers is more volume. We do more volume, we get more meetings, we book more pipeline. However, again, it goes back to that premature automation. If you're just repeating the same thing over and over again, but you're not looking at where the efficiencies are or are not, and you're not looking at where we can build in incremental improvements, you're not really going to see much of a difference. Yes, you'll get a difference because you're doing more volume, there's more throughput.
Yeah.
But what would the results be if we increase the conversions by 5% versus increasing the volume by 5% and not focusing on the conversions?
Yeah. It's fascinating because in a revenue role, it's so quantifiable, and you can very clearly see the increase, and you can very much focus on the short term and kind of look for those quick solutions. But obviously volume which doesn't actually lead to qualified pipeline, is kind of useless.
Mm-hmm.
It can be quite difficult to just focus on like purely quality and having a quality conversation.
Sure.
And in the Effective Seller Manifesto, you talk about Alice, who has, a good example of a cold calling block is she has 5 high quality conversations. How do you actually kind of define quality within the sales activity, and how do you actually teach leaders to have a quality approach with their outreach?
Yeah, this whole quality conversations, I think I said, like, in the ideal world, you would want to comp people on quality conversations, although it's a bit too fluffy and it's really hard to quantify. But what I mean by a quality conversation is, like, we know for a while now that in Chet Holmes, the ultimate sales machine, only 3% of your market are actively buying right now. 7% are looking, 90% are not really in an active buying state right now. We can't ignore those 90%, but we should be speaking to them. Quality conversations means, did I discover that this company has a pain or doesn't have a pain? Do they have a solution? Do they have one of our competitors in place? Have I learned something which I could use, not against them, but use towards this account in the future? And that's a quality conversation. I think the problem, and it always has been the problem with BDRs and SDRs, is that there's a very short-term mindset to it. And even as a BDR myself...
But this is the nature of the role, right? You're booking meetings for the month.
Yeah, it's not down to the individual. It's like they have a target to hit, and they have to hit that every month. Last month they didn't hit it, and they got in shit with their boss, with their manager. And they start from the new month with 0 again. Yeah. So there's this short-term mentality, and it's the way it's been forever. But the reps that I've seen succeed the most and like advance in their career take a long-term approach to outbound. So take Alice in that example, having those quality conversations where somebody says, oh no, we actually use this solution, or we're implementing this solution. We've already made a decision. Most reps would go, okay, let me go and put the just disposition as not qualified or using a competitor. The leading rep or the high performing rep would go, okay, they're implementing, but it doesn't mean that they're using. It doesn't mean that implementation went right. What I want to do is find out what that implementation date is, or when are they starting, and when do they plan to have that implementation rolled out? Because I'm going to call them back then and see how it went. And when I worked in recruitment, I was one of my roles, I was recruiting accountants, so part qualified accountants. In the East Midlands, around 40, 50K a year roles. So not your junior roles, but not kind of the senior. And I would say 25% of the time when I spoke to somebody who said, oh no, we've made an offer to somebody, I would try and get that person's name, because I'm also thinking, where are they leaving? Because I want to try and backfill that position, because they're leaving from a company and I want to put a candidate in that company. And then I'm trying to find out their name and their start date. Oftentimes I wouldn't get the name unless they kind of slipped up by mistake and I wasn't trying to manipulate them. If they didn't give me the name, I'd say which company, and I'd try and get the company. And oftentimes, because they said no to the name, they'd say yes to the company, and they'd say it. Then I'd call that company and say, you might need somebody. And then find out their start date. And I would call them on that start date and say, did the management accountant start today? Oh no, he had a conversation with his wife over the weekend, and he got a counter offer from his existing company, and he's staying there. I'm like, okay, do you need a temporary management accountant to come in and fill that gap you have now while you hire the next person? Yes, we do. So that was me taking a long-term view. Of course, it's like motivation by money, because I'll earn some commission on the temp placement, but I wasn't taking that no for a no forever. It was like a no for now.
Interesting. And so a couple questions here. The first one is the nature of the SDR role, and Mark Roberge, he writes in his book, The Sales Acceleration Formula, like the most important lever a sales team has, or a sales leader has, is a compensation piece. So is there a way of kind of changing the whole kind of KPI of an SDR, and instead of looking at monthly meetings booked, it's the quality of conversations over a specific year? Do you think there's any way that we can like start building that approach?
Yeah, yes, everything's possible now, right? So yes, there could be. I probably don't have like enough data or anecdotes to back up a claim here, but an idea would be you would need to track every conversation they have, and you would probably need to get the rep to fill out a particular form or custom field. Maybe that's with AI filling that out as well, but you would need to have something to track it. You couldn't just say to your BDR manager, what do you rate the quality of their conversations to be in the last month, in the last year? So you would need to have some data to be able to track that and then comp on it. But ultimately, you still need to comp on some of the key metrics. But I just think it shouldn't be solely activity based. It should be activity, results, pipeline generated, and ideally close one as well. There was an example of a different client of mine. One of their sales reps hit 160% of her quota. She got taken to, I think, Barbados or somewhere like with President's Club. Not one of those deals closed.
Oh, really?
So if you comp just on the activity without looking at the metrics further down the funnel and the conversions, then that's also not great either. But again, that's the short-term mindset that some organizations have. But I am seeing more organizations changing to be less activity. We understand that activity is important, but it's not all about activity.
Yeah, but because how do you toe the line there? Because an SDR is incentivized for sort of short-term gains and booking meetings. And as an individual, we're motivated by things that we can control.
Yeah.
And booking a meeting is something that we can control.
Yeah.
Whether it closes or not can be is largely falls on the AE, and it kind of does fall on the SDR as well. So if you're a sales leader, or you perhaps a go-to-market agency as well, how do you kind of toe the line between what falls within the responsibility of an SDR and what falls within the responsibility of an AE?
I think a good metric is sales qualified accepted opportunities, because in that sense the meeting's been booked and it's then gone to the AE and the AE has approved it, or sales accepted lead, companies call them different. But if the AE approves it and then the person takes the call, then that's a pretty good metric, because you've done as much as you can with the qualification of that prospect. You've made sure that you've explored what their challenges are and that they are a good fit, and these are the reasons why. You've handed that off to the AE. I understand there are some AEs who can close extremely well, and there's some AEs that can struggle to close the door. So it shouldn't be on the BDR or SDR, but having those sales accepted leads could be a good kind of bridge metric.
Bridge metric. Cool. Really, really interesting conversation around the SDR role. I want to change gears a bit and talk about data. You recently looked up Clay's own revenue across different data platforms, and I think the estimates range from 0 to about 36 million. Like the same company could have a couple of different, like vastly different data sets there. As we start handing more and more research to AI and start automating away the intelligence-based workflows, how do we ensure that data quality hits the standard for what we're really looking for to ensure that we have high quality sales outreach? Yeah,
it's tricky because you want to trust the data, but it depends on how good that data source is. Anything that's almost public information, you can trust that with more weighting. So if you're looking at a company headquarter location, that's going to be pretty accurate across the board. If you're looking at headcount growth and it's using LinkedIn and you're targeting people whose company pages are on LinkedIn, that's going to be fairly accurate, but it's going to be a range. And I think what the problem is that we've got so used to building lists in tools like Apollo, ZoomInfo, Cognism, Lusher, whatever we're using to build the list. We're looking at filters and we're saying headcount is between this number and this number. Revenue has to be 40 million plus, let's say, or let's use Clay, has to be 30 million plus. Depending on the database you use will depend whether Clay is in that list ultimately, because some are reporting Clay as 10 million, whereas some are reporting it as 36. So you have to one, understand like what is the quality, what's the likelihood that this data will be correct or incorrect? That's first of all. And then for those that anything that's private or internal, you have to be flexible with what it is that you're searching. And unfortunately, with the tools that we use, it's very much black and white. It's like if this and that. If the company is using Salesforce, then show me the results. But that company, there could be companies that are using Salesforce. The data just doesn't track that they're using Salesforce, for example. So I think going into your list building process with that understanding is very important, and understanding that you might have to be a little bit looser with your parameters for your search. And then what I always recommend is to have a human spot check as well. I will go through a list of 10,000 leads for a client of mine, and I will click on maybe 20 or 40 companies and try and see
at random,
completely at random.
You're not individually checking.
No, there's complete madness in the methodology in the sense that I'm just doing it completely randomly. But as soon as I spot a problem, I'm like, okay, this now requires me to look even deeper. So that's one way of doing it as well, and spot checking. I think the other thing, and I've kind of wrestled with this of like, is it being lazy or am I not trying to find a solution? I think there's just a level of acceptance that there will be some data that's wrong, and that's okay.
So do you think then, we've seen a lot of data-focused companies like Full Image, for example, doing really, really well. Do you think that the moat then for SaaS companies today, and this is a bit of an aside, is really around the quality of data in outbound?
Yeah, I definitely do, because you can have the great offer, you can have great messaging, You can have the best health and safety training, as I mentioned before. But if you're sending that to people who don't own an office or they don't have a physical location, then your outbound is not going to be effective. Your SDR manager is going to be looking at the activity, and the activity is looking great. They're making the calls, they're making the attempts, they're maybe connecting with a percentage of those, which is a decent number. They're sending this many emails, they've got these many connections on LinkedIn, all to the wrong people.
The wrong people. Yeah, I see. Now, interesting kind of side question I had. We're only kind of 3 years into the AI revolution, and the models keep getting better and better. I think my brother, who's, he lives and breathes this, and he's always excited with the next model. When Opus 4, when the latest Anthropic model came out, it kind of fundamentally changed like the decks that we could create, the sales assets. But maybe in a few models' time, we'll get to an ability where actually an AI can have like judgment-related conversations and can actually carry out the tasks which they can't currently do. So what's like something that an SDR is doing now, or perhaps an AI is doing now, which requires a lot of judgment, which you think AI could potentially disrupt in the next year or two?
So on 4.6, this is a great question. On 4.6, I was on paternity leave when it came out. I took 3 months off at the end of last year into this year. And I promised myself and my wife and my new family that I wasn't going to work. And then all I could see on LinkedIn when I was checking it was Opus 4.6, game changing. It's changing everything. It's phenomenal. And I was having massive FOMO. Like I really wanted to jump in and test it and play with it. I kept my promise to myself and I didn't. I came back at the end of January and I felt massively behind because there was not only did 4.6 come out, but also Coworker started to come out. And then you've got Claude Code and you use it from the desktop and you can do this. You can build agentic workflows pretty much with your eyes shut. And I was like, wow, the game has completely changed. I think it's very different for a established large sales organization to implement some of the Claude Code stuff that maybe the agencies can do or the individuals can do. I think companies who are less mature with their outbound will actually use and leverage AI better and quicker than some of the bigger companies because you've got the whole change management thing. But they'll catch up eventually. But going back to I don't know what my business model is going to look like in 6 months' time. In a year's time. I think the agency and the software agency as a service, the YC, that's a very interesting thing to talk about as well. But if AI does improve, what does a human still need to do? I think it's trust, it's rapport, it's curiosity, because an AI might be able to qualify a prospect, and a person might be able to, an AI might be able to ask somebody a question and they give an answer. But what was their tone? Do I think they were telling the truth? Did they hesitate before they answered? And that means that I should pry a little bit more, ask a follow-up question. I don't see the AI being able to do that. Maybe not in the next iteration, maybe in 5 years' time, 100%. But I think that will be the thing that remains for humans in the short to medium term.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned that in the Effective Seller Manifesto piece, it's purely supply and demand in the world, perhaps in not too distant future. You might have high quality AI SDRs and even some AI AEs. But then that kind of feels normal. It feels, a bit boring. But when you get to speak to a human, that could be exciting. That could be interesting. Yeah. And it's purely supply and demand, right? You want what there isn't there.
Yeah, I think we've all been there with the AI chatbots for customer support. I've got a very specific question. It's not in the 5 FAQs that you've told me to look at. I just want to speak to a human. Now, that's me trying to cancel my mobile phone bill. Okay, so it's a very, very small decision. It's not going to impact other people. If I'm a senior decision maker making a huge purchase, I do not want to be speaking to an AI chatbot. In fact, I'd be offended if you made me go through that process to get to a human. So I think we've still got to remember that most selling scenarios are still from a human to a human. There is an argument that agents will buy from agents. Maybe anything under $1,000 a month might be
agents buy from agents. Yeah,
might be purely agentic in that sense. But whenever there is nuance, as we were saying before, whenever there's questions around compliance, about safety, about concern, about how do we roll this out, if it's more complex software, then I think there's still going to be that human element to it.
Yeah, I mean that's for really, really large deals. But you see that even sensitive questions, and this is a bit of a tangential topic, but in the world of kind of therapy, AI and LLMs do provide, I guess, sort of soft touch support for some individuals. I think even in rural China, for example, a lot of individuals are actually using ChatGPT as like a form of psychological and psychosocial support. but obviously it doesn't address really, really deep psychological problems. So perhaps it's the same thing in sales. AI procurement agents can I guess buy smaller deals which don't require too much diagnosis and problem shaping, but the larger deals then obviously require a human.
Yeah, I think right now, so the problem that AI has in the sales process is that we all tried ChatGPT when it first came out and it was pretty shit.
Yeah.
And we tried to get it to write an email and it didn't write a good email.
No, it's true.
Even now, it's not great. Claude Opus 4.6 is good. Is good. Just remove the M dash.
Yeah.
The hallucination problem is a big issue in putting distrust into general consumers of using AI. I'll give a really silly example. I was building, I just wanted to see if I could take a prospect research using Twain, which is a great tool, run it through Claude to create a wrap, and then put it into, I can't remember, I think 11 Labs or something to create like a hip hop rap, which was pitching my services to a prospect. Just wanted to see if that was possible. It's possible. But as with 11 Labs and some of the other kind of voice to text or voice to audio, text to audio, you're not allowed to say, make it sound like Kanye West or make it sound like this rapper because of copyright. You have to describe the music, the tone of it. And I'm not really that well versed in describing the difference. Like, what's the difference between Nas and Kanye West? Like, how do I describe the difference? So I went to ChatGPT and asked it to kind of give me the descriptive words that I could then put in, and it came out with like, "Great idea. You're the best prospector ever. Here are some genres that you can try." And it was like business rock. I was like, business rock? There can't be such thing as business rock. So I Googled it. There's no such thing as business rock because I tried hip hop. I wanted to try like rock. And so I Googled business rock, no such thing as business rock. And I was like, did you just make up business rock as a genre? And it was like, yes, I did. And I think that's the problem at the moment. Inherently, we can't truly trust AI. And until we as the consumers can trust that it's going to be accurate. And I think it's great that people are starting to have conversations for therapy and for like mental health, but you've got to be careful with where you're asking, not because of like the confidential information, that's a whole other debate, but what answers are you getting and are they leading you around the right path? Because you could be in a very vulnerable state right there when you're asking like, what can I do to not feel this way? And it gives you some suggestions and go and listen to business rock. You could be going off in quite dangerous paths. So there's still a long way to go. But I don't think it will be, you said 3 years, and I can't believe it's only been 3 years since like AI has proliferated our world in the way it has now. It's taken 0 to 3 years to get here. It might only take 6 months to get to the next level of it being, okay, we can trust it now. It's not hallucinating as much. It might be.
Yeah, extraordinary times we live in. And I think as we were having a coffee in that lovely Lisbon cafe, just enjoying the sun, you sort of said that sometimes you feel at the cutting edge of what's going on and sometimes you feel so behind. Every week. Can you explain that kind of dichotomy? Yeah, so like I'm trying my hardest to keep on top of the bleeding edge of what's happening with Claude Code, and just even trying to follow Anthropic's release notes is hard enough with all the different things that they're releasing. Then you go through a process of like implementing it. So you take what is a feature and then you apply it to a real world scenario, which is a scenario that I might be facing myself or with my clients. And then you've also got to think about the change management piece as well. Like, how will somebody use this? So I can build something for myself, but then how do I build something for one of my clients and release it in their instance and then train their team on how to use it? By which point, next week, they've released another feature or they've improved let's say it's the skills or the plugins marketplace. All that time I just spent building that skill, testing it myself, implementing it, training the team, I could have just pressed one button and that skill would have gone there. That's not exactly an example, but so that's how I feel, like bleeding edge of staying on top of everything, but finding it very hard to stay on top of everything because there's that process in the middle of having to test, improve, iterate, and implement. And then it just constantly changes as well. And it's funny that when I look at my services I offer through my consulting, they're very different now. If I try to AI enable all my services, what may have taken me 2 months and dozens of hours with a client takes an hour and maybe 3 days because I'm leveraging AI on top of my own IP and my own processes and own systems. So what does that mean for my business? Do I charge the same amount of time and just keep the middle, increase my profit margins? Or do I reduce the price a little bit and work with more people, but then also not spend as much time on it because I can trust that the AI is going to do the job? So that's now. What's it going to be like in 6 months?
So that's constant feeling of being pushed and pulled in the various different directions is why I feel that way.
Yeah. And on that piece you mentioned around having company IP, don't know if you saw like Jack Dorsey's pod, but he talks a lot around this idea of building like a company intelligence layer, where all of your Slack, your conversations, your mail, all of that becomes your IP, and you kind of build that into whatever your company IP. Do you think like that's a moat that's going to protect you against the future? Do you think that's something worth investing in?
Certainly, I think there's the context layer. So context before everything is give the context of who your ideal client profiles are, who the personas are, what problems you solve, how you solve them, social proof of where you've solved them. Just giving that to an AI at one layer is going to really improve the output of your AI. But then when you start to have when you think internally as a company, how do we make decisions? And what are the processes we go through to make decisions? How do we think about X? How do we think about Y? How do we structure? How do we implement? How do we do the things that we do? Feeding that all into AI is just going to basically supercharge your ability to just execute across the organization. But the question is the privacy and whether or not you should be giving that much data to an AI agent, even if you're on the enterprise plan as well, because everything essentially could be vulnerable one day. So I think that's the bigger conversation, is like, how secure is it and how safe is it? For example, giving your ideal client profile definition and persona definitions, I can work that out from looking at your website. If your website was up to date. Of course, if you're going to change your website tomorrow, then it might be different. But yeah, the internal IP, the confidential stuff, it's still, as a consultant, I'm not recommending people do or don't, which is a classic consultant response.
So what do you then turn to, obviously in a world where the only constant is change? What is that bedrock, the kind of foundation that you rest on? Is it on the fundamental humanness of all of us?
Yeah, I think human always. You'll see that there will be a bigger move to offline events. We're doing this in person, and it feels really nice to do it again. Nice, yeah. I'm already thinking, how can I do this more often? We'll want more interpersonal stuff to happen, and that's why I think events and breakfast meetups and lunch and learns are a strategy that GTM teams are using right now. Is to, okay, we've got a unique venue in New York, or an interesting venue in New York. Let's get 10 of the procurement leaders to come and join us. We're going to a web summit in Lisbon later this year. Let's go and do a happy hour on just outside of Lisbon. I went to sell Dreamforce the other year, and I just happy houred it. I just went from one happy hour to another, met some clients, met some friends, and just went. I didn't have a ticket for Dreamforce. I just went to soak in the atmosphere from it. So I think in person is always going to be is going to trump everything, not only in our business life but also in our personal life too.
Yeah. We actually did an outbound our best performing outbound campaigns for clients are always when it's like directed to a conference or a dinner in person. I mean, people love it. It's an invitation to connect with others. Obviously, the offer's pretty good, but yeah, it performs. It doesn't even feel like outbound. It performed extraordinarily well. One
of the clients at TaskDrive, our job, we had 2 researchers dedicated. We looked at all of the conferences that happened where their personas and ideal clients would be going to. And then we would build a list of companies that existed in that area. And then sometimes we'd be able to find the attendees of the conference, depending if they had an app that we could scrape. And we would run an outbound campaign. So let's say it was Dreamforce in San Francisco. You could pretty much pick a lot of companies in San Francisco and say, we're going to Dreamforce, will you be there? We'd run the campaign to see if they would be open for a coffee or a beer. And if they booked 20 meetings, they'd buy the tickets to go to San Francisco. If they didn't book 20 meetings, they'd just go, oh, something's come up, can't make it anymore, would love to see you another time. And then it would go to the CES in Las Vegas, for example. That was their pure outbound campaign, and it worked very, very well for them.
Wow. I guess people just want humans, right? People want a connection.
Yeah, back on the human point, a friend of mine asked me about, he's thinking of running events in London, and he said that there's been lots of events being run for things like a dinner at Sushi Samba at Heron Tower, or breakfast at Duck and Waffle, whatever, like nice restaurants, good food, bring some people together. And I said to him that I think it's just not unique enough. If everybody's doing that, you need to do something different. So why don't you try and find some more interesting venues or interesting things and tap into like nostalgia and feelings? So one example, that these were just ideas that I shared, I didn't have to execute, but like a Jack the Ripper tour in Whitechapel, and then go for a beer after. If that's the audience that is okay with drinking beers, or even like historic pub tours of London. They're fantastic. You want to create an experience or a moment that people remember, even if it has nothing to do with the SEO services that he was selling. He wants his name and company name to be in the mind of those people when they have the problem.
Yeah.
So doing unique experiences, like in London, they open up the underground to some of the disused train stations, and you can go down and visit them. Do that.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Mark, we're coming on to the end there. The alarm is beeping. Really been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to having you on on here very soon.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Cheers, man.